Now, another topic I think that gets completely ignored in mainstream is the environmental risk linked to breast cancer. As a matter of fact, if you go to, I think it's American Cancer Society's website, and they talk about breast cancer, they say that the 2 factors associated with developing breast cancer, and this is, to me, it's like ridiculous, but this is what they say, is number 1, you have to be a woman, and although men can also develop breast cancer, obviously it's more common in women. And number 2 is age. The older you are, the greater the risk. Which in my opinion is ridiculous, because breast cancer is on this meteoric rise. It's been rising for the last 50 years. Outside of 2000, around that 2002 mark, when doctors really stopped using synthetic estrogens for fear of creating cancer, there was a dip in breast cancer for a few years at that time. But now the incidence continues to rise. And one of the reasons why, it's the topic that no one talks about. It's the environmental risks linked to breast cancer. So, for example, the garbage in sunscreen that they tell you, don't get skin cancer, lather up, right, with all these toxic compounds in your sunscreen, benzophenone 3, which is a carcinogenic compound in a lot of these products. And that's the doctor's advice, right? Avoid skin cancer, but slather up in something that increases your risk for breast cancer. Right? And we also see a lot of this, the endocrine disrupting chemicals as well. And probably the most famous is BPA. The buzzword right now on the street, the healthy buzzword is BPA free. You keep seeing that, on the plastic water bottles. Now BPA free. Well, BPA is a class or a family of chemicals, BP or bisphenol, which is a type of chemical, and there's BPA, and there's BPB, and there's BPC. Well, they're only BPA free, but it's still plastic. It's still an endocrine disrupting battery of chemicals that are going to increase your risk for health issues. So, take it, quit drinking out of plastic. I know a lot of you carrying around your plastic water bottles everywhere you go. Stop it. It's one of the worst things that you can do is drink or eat off of or heat food up in or store food in plastics, because these chemicals are endocrine disrupting chemicals. Some of them mimic estrogen, and some of them interact with estrogen receptors and increase the risk for the development of cancer. So just stop doing it. It's a very easy lifestyle change to make. Another thing we see are high levels of triclosan. So this is ironic right now, is it doesn't matter where you go in the world, everybody is lathering their hands up in all these antibacterial, antiviral, liquids, right? Soaps and lotions. And matter of fact, right now, I just got off an airplane yesterday, traveling from Florida, and the first thing they do is they hand you this chemically loaded towel to wipe off your hands. And of course, it's got high levels of this substance, this triclosan, which is a known carcinogen. And so for the sake of protecting yourself from infection, they're telling you lather up in a carcinogen. It makes zero sense. And then we have chemicals that increase estradiol and progesterone synthesis, or we have other chemicals that are sprayed on. So let me give you examples of this. So this is like your pesticides, your herbicides, your fungicides, the stuff that's on your food, right? So if you're not eating organically, let me give you a reason to eat organically. If you're not eating organically, this is what you're getting. You're getting carcinogenic toxic compounds. One of them in particular is something called atrazine. Atrazine has been shown to upregulate estrogen receptors, and it's been linked to a number of major health issues. And so this is one of the most common, especially here in Texas. I know for a fact it's one of the most common sprays of broadleaf applications to knock out broadleaf weeds and other grasses. So it's not just atrazine either, it's things like glyphosate. So you've got a lot of different chemicals that can contribute to this. And one of the other ones we don't even have on here is cosmetics. Ladies, one of the reasons why the cancer is more prevalent in you, aside from the fact it's breast cancer, right, is the cosmetics. Men don't wear them typically, right? Men also, well, this isn't true, but also it's the aluminum antiperspirants that so many wear. These antiperspirants have aluminum, and you know one of the thoughts behind the aluminum is you wipe it into your armpit, that aluminum clogs into your pores and overwhelms your lymphatic fluid there, and it backs it up into the breast, contributing to an increased risk of cancer development. So we've got cosmetics, we've got antiperspirants, we've got pesticides, and like again, we voluntarily lather ourselves up in this stuff. We put this on so that we don't sweat, and we drink out of BPA chemically loaded plastic water bottles as we eat food that's just doused in pesticides. And when we go outside, we lather up in sunscreen so that we don't get a sunburn and get skin cancer, but the sunscreen causes cancer. And then we wash our hands every 5 seconds because everybody's scared of a virus right now. We wash our hands in chemicals that actually cause cancer. So we have this milieu cocktail of carcinogens that we're exposing ourselves to on a daily basis. And when you combine that with the poor nutrition, right, the nutritional deficiencies that are there, and you combine that with a number of the different medications, estrogen-based medications, synthetics that women are taking, and you combine that too with other medications. So like the average person over the age of 45 in the United States is on 4 or more medications, and many of those medications cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies to destroy your GI tract, destroy your gut lining. And one of the newer realms of research right now is looking at this compound right here. It's called LPS. That stands for lipopolysaccharide. This is a bacterial toxin. And what does that have to do with cancer? Here's what we're learning. This is new science, but we see in guts, especially where people have taken a lot of antibiotics, or they're taking antacid medications or allergy medicines that destroy stomach acid, is they get an overgrowth of bacteria. So they get an overgrowth of bacteria, which increases bacterial toxin production. These toxins cause intestinal permeability or leaky gut. These toxins then travel to the liver, and they can really damage the liver in a very big way. And this is now being linked to liver cancers. Well, one of the risks of breast cancer is when the liver struggles, because a lot of your estrogen metabolism, a lot of the way that we metabolize these estrogens from being a cancer-causing estrogen to being an estrogen that the body can easily excrete is through the liver. So when the liver's struggling because it's being overburdened by bacterial endotoxins that are leaking across, and if you drink alcohol, now add alcohol to this mix, and then add all these other things, you can see how you would get a perfect storm. So our modern life, our modern society has really created a cocktail that's conducive to the development of cancer. And that's why we see this rising in breast cancer and not so much a reduction, is because these things are getting worse as each year goes on, not better. And people just aren't being taught. They're not being told. By the time you get the diagnosis, it's, hey, let's chop off your breasts. And that sounds a little brutal, but this is the reality. Let's chop off your breasts, and then let's radiate you. And then, oh, by the way, for 5 more years after that, we'll put you on a drug called tamoxifen, which is the main drug post-breast cancer. And tamoxifen is a SERM. It's a selective estrogen receptor modulator. But it's linked to an increased risk for the development of autoimmune disease. So now we'll put you on a drug for 5 years that increases your risk for developing autoimmune disease. And of course, autoimmune disease progresses. As it progresses, autoimmunity actually, in many cases, becomes cancer. And so if you don't treat the reason the cancer came, the origin of why the cancer is there, the reason why it's developing, you're never going to win, because if you go that mainstream medical route, you're just going to get chopped on, you're going to get poisoned until it goes into remission. And then everybody celebrates remission as if it's a mega victory, when in reality there is no victory there. I would say if you didn't die, that's great. If you had a cancer that could be terminal and surgery and removal helped save your life, that's not what I'm saying, but we should be celebrating what we can do to prevent it. We shouldn't be celebrating the deformity and the mass surgical outcomes that we've basically normalized as a society, instead of having this other conversation that we've talked about tonight. So I think it's very important that you understand that. I think it's very important that you have that conversation with your loved ones, because if we don't have that conversation, it's never going to change, and we're just going to see more and more women go through this just horrific process of early detection, surgical removal, chemical manipulation, and then years of drug-induced autoimmune disease as kind of a backlash. And that's, to me, it's not a victory. We're not winning cancer. We're not erasing cancer in that way. The way we win is we identify where it's coming from and why it's happening, and we change our behaviors accordingly. And without those behavioral changes, nothing's ever going to happen to make this better. So I just don't want to see any of you go through that. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.